Hi everyone, I'm glad you found my video content if you're new. Hi, I'm KP, and I'm gonna tell you about some obscure animation today. Yay! So when you think of weird animation, what do you think of? Maybe some pilots that never got greenlit? Maybe like Courage the Cowardly Dog, like all of it? Or some trippy pilots from like the early 1980s that never got greenlit or something? Or all of Yellow Submarine? I've never seen Yellow Submarine, I'm scared too. Who are you? Why are you blue and why are you a meanie? Is there a nicey?
Glad you asked. Funny story. Not funny, haha, but it was a Tuesday.
Well, in roaming the internet for a long time, I came familiar with Clone High, which was an animated series produced by MTV. You know, MTV, the big animation studio thing that came out of music. But how did this even start? Well, way back in the early 2002s, MTV was short of having a break in animation. For those unfamiliar, and really this seems to be like a foreign concept nowadays, MTV was a music television network that originally promoted, as you guessed it, a music video network. In its start, their programming consisted of 24/7 streams of music videos for popular stars at the time, with other segments of interviews with music celebrities, and overall trying to change how popular music was consumed. First starring Video Killed the Radio Star. You get it? Having music videos accessible not only at the time was more of a mainstream way to provide promotion, especially for groups that needed that sweet notoriety. This was MTV's big claim to fame, promoting not only the music in question, but the group's appearance and aesthetic as well. This worked out for a little while, but like its cousin, the History Channel, these guys, remember them?
My idea of happiness is killing things.
Oof. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the appeal of this actually was. Anyway, over time, this business model would draw less and less of an interest in the main public, especially with the rise of the internet. So as you probably guessed by now, there was a lot of trial and error in creating successful original MTV programming. Their animated programming actually originated from bumps between videos, and then someone brought up the idea to turn it into its own programming. Results were varied. Beavis and Butthead had a big advantage of being one of the first animated programs aimed at adults, with a very non-traditional style, and its spin-off, Daria, is even more well-remembered for its meta and sarcastic take on teenage and suburban life, while keeping Daria herself a lovable character in its own right.
The studio decided to make a show related to the disaffected misfit youth rather than making fun of it.
But even those shows have a ton of network interference despite being pop culture hits. Daria's broadcasting schedule was moved around all over the place in later years. And remember what happened a few years ago? Again? So I think it just got renewed like last year, and then it got renewed like in 2016. Which is stupid. This can be chalked up to a lot of factors, like MTV not being an animation-specific network, or even a network used for producing a lot of its own original content, as well as an unstable audience because of its continued adaptation and change as a brand. Enter Clone High. In a lot of ways, Clone High was something of an outlier in all this, as Daria and the Butthead boys are closely related to each other. Daria was a spin-off of Beavis and Butthead. There you go, you learned a thing today. Clone High was one of the ever-enduring ideas that were from a different creative team, created by Bill Lawrence of Scrubs fame, and later Cougar Town, which is a fun show that was poorly named. Fight me in the comments. With Lawrence's help, Chris Miller and Phil Lord, yes, those guys.
There's also no consistency.
Yes, those guys.
Think you're gonna be a bad teacher.
We'll touch on them in a second. Yes, you can leave your Spider Sona name in the comments. Go ahead. I can't stop you. The show's setting was a high school dominated by historical clones of famous people, leading to a satire of suburban life, high school in general, and I hope you're ready for a bunch of history jokes.
What the hell is he doing here? I came to confess. I was the second gunman on the grassy knoll.
You get it? You get it? Tragedy is funny. With one season of 11 episodes, which isn't that much by the way, the show is great at both establishing the tone that it's trying to convey, setting up a scene, as well as combining it all with comedy. Let's break down the introductory scene with Principal Skedworth.
Little do they know, I control them. For what is more powerful than a high school principal?
Establishing character and motivation, establishing elated ego while commenting on the power of authority, establishing power for control from multiple parties while making fun of government secret task force, as well as commenting on Squidward's sanity in context.
Blasphemy!
Establishing denial of that from Skedworth by also landshaming it, establishing Butlertron as a weird quirk in Skedworth's character,
Morty Wesley,
He calls everyone Wesley. Don't know why.
as well as more slippage into sanity, establishing power struggle and overall dynamic. Scudworth is my favorite just because he's so eccentric and self-aware. Other characters are a combination of parodies of their historical counterparts as well as their own interpretations outright. Joan of Arc is a goth teen who's cynical to counter expectations. I don't know if you looked up the real Joan of Arc, but she's kind of the opposite of cynical. Kind of took over the French army and, won as a teenager. I know, I was there. I was totally there.
Right.
Abe is a girl-obsessed nice guy who suffers a lot of the physical humor portrayed. He's also oblivious to the very obvious crush that Joan has on him.
I want you.
You want me to what?
And this is a running gag. Seriously, they reference it all the time. Still, despite being very simple and relaxed, his main job is a stand-in for the unpopular boy who wants a vapid girl out of his league. Like lots of guys.
No, that's the best part. It'll just be like you and me.
Yeah. He's also blissfully unaware of his surroundings sometimes, which makes it easier when Gandhi pitches him stupid ideas, or in general, is stupid. Speaking of Gandhi, he's turned into a problematic party animal. More on that later. Cleopatra is a self-obsessed queen bee, and then there's John F. Kennedy, who's probably the most exaggerated version of his historical counterpart.
I thought he was a macho, womanizing stud who conquered the moon!
The general appeal can be boiled down to its snarky and quick comedy, as well as an overarching arc buildup, and it's still a favorite to this day by many animation fans. So if you're not into history, then don't worry, the history jokes are pretty obvious. So what happened? Remember that thing I said earlier about MTV and marketing? So it was a little of that, but there was also this issue of maybe turning Gandhi, a still widely respected figure today, into a party animal was not the best move in hindsight. Whoops. Clone High got canceled before cancel culture was a thing. Think about that. I like how Indians were offended by Gandhi, but everyone else thought JFK was fair. JFK seems historically accurate.
Nothing bad ever happens to the Kennedys!
It's fine. Surprisingly, instead of a show centered around teens having one secular love interest in mind most of the time, much of the drama, if you can call it that, is centered around which girl Abe will end up with. Although romantic-themed tropes are done a lot, even still today, what makes this work is the over-the-top execution, and just plain funny and stupid twist that ends up presenting.
Behold the soothing power of this enchanted sweater vest.
Behold it!
I think one of the very clever themes throughout the series is the underlying reason that many of the clones try to reestablish their identity, because of fear of not living up to their predecessors. There's a subplot that even explores this, where Joan has finally started hearing voices from God, which is allegedly something the original Joan could do, but I don't know.
We have a mission for you. And she was like, what?
Probably after Scudworth, though, JFK seems to take the cake. And no, they refer to him only as JFK. This is an interesting example of using a character that originally served as a plot point, aka the beginning obstacle for Cleo, and double entendre legend.
But if you can't stay up, I'm sure there's someone else who can.
I can stay up all night long!
But over the series, we get hints that he was emotionally vulnerable, which in a combination to the events that happened in the last few episodes, but those are a little spoilery, so we won't get into those too much. Watch the show and come back. It's not that long. It only takes you about 5 hours. You'll be fine. What else are you gonna do? Watch more KP videos after you're done, please. Subscribe. One of the biggest selling points here is the art style. I get it, it's hard sometimes when character designs are solely based on the personalities of characters versus a consistent look. Think American cartoons versus anime. But I personally find them appealing, especially JFK, but ultimately this is pretty subjective. Do you like how Total Drama looks? It's like the same thing, I think. It works well when you can tell what a character's personality is like just from how they're drawn, and ultimately saves some time when you're getting used to a run of a series. That's why animation feels like a great form of storytelling to me, because you can communicate so much the atmosphere just by how a show looks. Speaking of animation, we get some really creative animation here. Probably the most common recurring piece is Scudworth's curly fingers to display an extra part of his character, but as usual for animation, eye size and certain character elements are exaggerated when displaying emotion. But here the visuals are also used in a comedic sense, for the most part, that adds to the charm of the material. There's also some voice acting cameos from celebrities of the time, including Mandy Moore pre-Tangled. Remember, she was a thing and now she's a Disney princess. It all works out. We also have Marilyn Manson and the incomparable Jack Black, who's making a comeback these days thanks to Jumanji.
Oh my god, you guys, there's literally a penis attached to my body right now. Martha, come look at my penis!
No thanks.
Sometimes they are written as themselves, but other times, to add to the absurdist humor, they're raisin-pushing drug lords. There's an episode where a raisin is a drug, if you're wondering.
Huh, I don't really feel anything. Well, I have a strong constitution, so I don't really...
I can taste the sun!
I don't get it either. Why Clone High personally appeals to me is the relationships to the fourth wall and how it defines the narrative. We have an announcer who's making fun of himself.
And the odd thing is, my mic isn't even plugged in.
That's nothing, Chris. I've been talking into my fist for the last 5 minutes.
A weird relationship between Scudworth and John Stamos of all people.
Anywho, TV personality John Stamos called to rub it in how he beat you out for prom king when you were in high school.
You know, from Full House, the Full House guy? No, the other one. As well as the show's general quotability because some of the writing is outrageous. My favorite thing is, which I still quote to this day, that riot was unacceptable. Unacceptable? Did you see the pool? They flipped the bitch. That line is great. I love it. I still quote it today. Back to the real life stuff. Moon and Miller were pretty powerless to let all this cancellation stuff happen, but they loved the premise so much that they kept still trying to keep it alive as they moved on to other projects. With the similar brand of humor of Clone High, their later career moves turned out to be pretty successful, even though the Lego Movie was snubbed for the Oscar nomination, but I guess, what are you gonna do? I think it says a lot to the success of these projects when something on the surface looks like a cash grab. But on the surface, it's actually really smart and well-written commentary about what it means to be a kid and what you're allowed to enjoy as an adult. And are we getting too deep about Legos yet? It says a lot to the character of these guys when they're willing to go out of their way to not only embrace a concept that might look like a cheap marketing ploy externally, but make it resonate in a way that is respectful and meaningful to the audience watching it. While I think it comes as a shock to most people that usually properties titled X the movie can play up to those stereotypes about the basic plot, and the bare minimum needed to have a cohesive plot, and many times doesn't even have that. This movie exists to sell a stuff, and the brand knows it will make money, so sometimes more than I would like, really. Just the name can be a selling point. I'll leave it at that for now. This isn't a Lego Movie review, but from a writing perspective, the Lego Movie is more sophisticated than so many adult movies. From there, their professional career has basically kept up with a high bar. You might have seen some of their work, and it really says the quality of their work that they're willing to reinvent some of these properties in really fresh ways. And after all these years, Clone High has finally been renewed. So here's a question. Why did Lord and Miller need to get crazy successful for Clone High to be renewed? Well, I chalk it up to two trains of thought. One, so writers really aren't a mainstream thing, really. Let me explain. So you got your book authors, which I bet you can name a few off the top of your head, and then you have, like, creators of popular fiction. Mostly because the thing they wrote is widely successful, and the audience wants to understand the author's worldview and gripping of fiction as a whole, so they might understand the text better. We're not going into death of the author right now, that will take too long. But like television writers? I mean, even movie writers get this kind of treatment. The Academy Awards, for example, which is a giant pile of is mostly there to promote their already successful projects by their already successful stars, with some exceptions here and there, is mostly watched by the public for the quote-unquote glamour of Hollywood and whose dress your grandma likes the best. The attention of the masses is solely based on the stars, not really the other people. I'm sure you've all been to an Oscar party and the audience is like, who? When some of the beginning categories are announced. What's the director of cinematography? That sounds complicated. The only way that Hollywoods tend to get around this is by their name being all over the thing that they're trying to sell, so the general public knows that the thing is related to that guy who did the other thing. Think about Nightmare Before Christmas as branded Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, even though he did not direct the film, in case you didn't know that. He had to go make Batman instead. And Night Shyamalan also does something kind of similar when he tends to be in the public's favor, which is not all the time, frankly. Avatar nightmares. So how does this all relate to Clone High being renewed? We're living in an age where the audience has a much bigger say in the content that gets produced. How television ratings were measured in the past has been historically faulty, to the point that it was hard to tell sometimes how media was resonating to the television channel's audience. Fans sometimes have to write letters in order to show how passionate they were about a special piece of media, and sometimes that worked. Famously, the original Star Trek was saved by the female fan base after CBS syndication ratings were not all that hot, and Star Trek never had any problems ever again. Never, ever, 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 ever. An aspect that has not changed in all of this is how vocal audience demand has streamlined this process. Now with the internet, it's just easier for a lot of different changes to happen. Here, I'll give you an example. Surprise, you've been tricked to learn about Kim Possible on the ILoveKimPossibleAlot channel. So Kim Possible itself has been a victim to a bunch of this. For those who don't know, the show was supposed to end at the season 3 finale, so the drama. Back in the day, the golden number of syndication was 65 episodes. That's about 2.5 months of content that can be played on reruns on the weekdays. Remember the Phineas and Ferb theme song? 104 divided by 2 is 52, so that's around 65. And you account for space for multi-part episodes. Did you know that? I bet you didn't know that. Kim Possible fans campaigned Disney for more of the show, even though the case isn't as strong as Clone High, as Clone High had an incomplete arc. Will Kim Possible technically finish that story? So either the Save Kim Possible campaign saved the show, or a German contact requiring more episodes from Disney made them make more episodes. I don't know why, but Germans love their Kim Possible.
Mit dem Angriff Steiners wird das alles in Ordnung kommen.
Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl!
But like, why is this all important? Who cares if a 20-year-old show has a long-hanging arc? Why does it bother people so much? Well, I thought about it, and I have to view it as this, is that people are able to discover aspects of themselves with the kind of media they like, as well as inspiring them. For shows like Clone High, when the main narrative isn't finished, it's like loving an incomplete painting. We really identify with what came before it, but having and seeing the finished picture would help us understand what it all means, and what it means to us. Or maybe it's like having all the pieces to a puzzle, whatever metaphor you prefer. I'm all for the concept and idea about our favorite things in life helping us discover who we are on a deeper level.
She would have listened to her heart. And then she would have gotten burned at the stake, but what are the odds that could happen again?
38%.
So think about it next time you end up liking a cartoon or just something new. This, for example, has a lot to do with how well Samurai Jack aged throughout the years. And even later, fans were still gunning for closing to the main plot. Not only did we get a sequel, we got 2 sequels! Now, this one seems to have to do with creator Jendy Kurtakovsky's own preference to making the closer into a theatrical release and not so much fan interest. That didn't happen, obviously. The actual process of renewing Samurai Jack seemed pretty easy. Anyway, I'm gonna pass the metaphorical mic to Adam, who's written about Clone High himself and why he also thinks this is all important.
Oh, hey, I'm Adam. I'm another Clone High fan, and I've done a video about the show's music in the past. Clone High was always something that resonated with me ever since I found it through YouTube uploads of the show, and honestly I feel like it aged well. Had so much packed into a single season, and obviously had the potential to do more, but it was cut short. And I never felt a show deserved an ending more than Clone High. Well, okay, so Clone High isn't the only show that deserves a proper conclusion, but you get my point. This isn't a Teen Titans situation where we got an ending but it simply wasn't what we wanted. This is more like a Bobobo situation. Yeah, remember that anime? That anime just ended on a huge cliffhanger, literally right before the final arc. That's 70-something episodes. It's played as a joke, yeah, but it's also a gut punch because you ended up getting attached to these characters despite them being in a nonsensical world chock full of nonsensical humor, because the bonds and growth of these characters were real. Sound familiar? There's never been a more absurd premise in Clone High, but they ran with it. And despite the obvious parodies and sardonic nature, the interactions between characters and how they grew was entertaining to see. JFK appearing to be a stereotypical bully, jock, womanizer to someone who was able to engage with his fellow peers as equals, be in touch with his sensitive side when faced with tragedy.
Hold me!
And treat Joan as an equal is a huge example of this. I feel like everyone has way more room to grow in a similar way. The seeds are there, but they just weren't given time to grow is all.
Oh, for a second there I felt bad for you, even though everything's going great for me. Is that crazy?
No, it's sympathy.
When you get attached to characters in a story, you invite them to your mind and heart. They may not be real people, but if they're written well, they'll feel like a real person. And when you can't see them anymore, it's like real people are moving away. It rips you right out. Nothing about Clone High resembles real life. Well, cloning people is technically possible, but that's besides the point. The mere idea of digging up historical figures and letting them live out their lives as teenagers is, well, silly. A lot of shows silly, but you can always find small bits of genuine emotion in the midst of all the insanity. Sure, Gandhi being ostracized and hated by the townspeople for his ADD is a bit far-fetched.
I don't really think it's safe for Gandhi to wander around without a spacesuit.
But the tension it brought when Gandhi questioned the loyalty of who he thought was his best friend, Abe, and Abe showed his loyalty to his friend in an unconventional way, sure, but with a gesture that showed that he cared more about the people close to him than his social status. Joan's entire character arc was come to one's own, because she felt ashamed of herself and didn't fit in.
You guys, I don't need to pretend to be someone else, you guys.
If anything, Joan was the only character that could completely stand out from being a clone, but that's because she rejected resembling her past self entirely, because she felt like she wasn't good enough.
See, I've never been able to live up to her. That's why, instead, I became a cynical, angst-ridden goth girl.
Even still, it wasn't insecurity to her, so when she felt like she was hearing religious voices, she felt validated, even if it was just a far-fetched misunderstanding.
We're 107 FM with a mix of fresh Christian jams. Slam first. His power is in the mix.
The whole John Dark story also goes without saying, where Joan had to assume another identity to escape into, because who she truly was just wasn't worth exploring to her, and she wanted to see if she would be treated differently or even better with a new persona. Joan just wanted to be accepted for herself, but forcing herself to be someone who she wasn't just to get Abe's approval ultimately backfired. Well, kinda, when you realize that JFK matured as well and was able to accept her for who she is. I admittedly can't say much more in regards to other characters like Cleo, who I can only say that I imagine someone like her is used to having the world revolve around her and being given constant praise and approval. So it'd be interesting to have that come to an end and how she ends up having to deal with it. I don't think she's a wholly bad person, no. More like a blank canvas. Sasha from Amphibia is someone that has a lot of potential. We simply thought at first she was just a mean girl and peer pressured Anne into doing stuff that she didn't want to do. But she has grown into her own person with morals and values, and still has complicated feelings regarding her actions, allegiances, and how she feels about Anne. You could see many characters like that when it comes to this show. Making characters more dynamic or complex doesn't have to ruin the whole show by making it melodramatic. The reason Clone High works is because it has an absurd premise, but can take itself seriously while still maintaining an air of humor throughout. Deeper character traits mean potentially deeper connections and relationships, which could lead to interesting conflicts and funny jokes. When you know how your characters function, you can picture them reacting to the same situation in different ways. A story like Clone High doesn't come along too often. And while humor should always be the focus, the fact that they ended up making deeper character dynamics on top of that just shows the genius of Lord and Miller and their crew. Average, even good creators can focus on making a comedy show full of comedy, but great creators can make a comedy with characters you can still genuinely enjoy on a deeper level, connect with them, and empathize with them. Clone High took itself as seriously as it had to maintain a fine balance between satirizing tension for jokes and having true emotional tension. Now that we know it's coming back, I can't wait for Lord, Miller, and everyone else involved to explore what makes all these clones so special a bit deeper, and to make us laugh, shiver, and cry once more.
So with that, we can finally call this story closed, as Clone High's story will be concluded in some aspect in the future. But I guess we'll have to see how the Gandhi change is executed. All in all, I'm really glad this happened, and I'm glad streaming service can change the run of how a sad story can turn into a happy ending. Clone High kind of had a weird beat to it, surrounding itself with history jokes and a whole range of comedic elements, but it's heartwarming that the original creators were able to finish off a project that they've been wanting to for so long. Despite how you feel about Clone High, it says something that these guys tried so desperately to revive it, despite their rising success. It's a funny, poignant dig on a lot of weird aspects of society, and if you like Scrubs, you might like Clone High too. So join the celebration and rightness of the universe setting back into its place, even just a little bit. And that's all, folks, except it's not time for the ending gag.
Cleopatra's coming at you. She's fresh, she's young, she's supple, she's like, I'm looking fabulous and fly, and she marries her brother Ptolemy.
I'm sorry, marries?
Yes.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please remember to leave a comment and share this with a friend or 2 or 5. Click here to subscribe, we really appreciate it. Click here to check out the main collaborator for this video. Click here to check out our video playlist for this video, where you might find similar videos that hopefully you like and enjoy. There's also a credits scroll here, where you can check out all the other awesome contributors. All their info is in the description. That's all I gotta say, KP away!